Right. Hi, everyone. Hopefully, you are back for episode 2 of our brand new podcast, Time to Try with Smiling Tri Coach. If you listen to our pilot episode, you will know that it was just me and Mel. And we use the episode to just kind of explain a little bit about who we are, what we do, what the podcast is trying to achieve. And we promised that we would have some real guests on. And we've got a real guest for you. So it's all very exciting. I'm going to let Mel introduce. But yeah, we're excited to speak to our first ever guest on our first ever podcast. So you're privileged.
Okay, so our first guest is the lovely Natasha, who is an athlete that I've coached. We've invited Natasha on because although she says she has nothing to say, I can promise you she has plenty to say and lots of very interesting things that I think you'll all be really interested to hear. So, what we're going to get Natasha to do is give you a little bit of an idea of how she got into triathlon and her background. So Natasha came from a swimming background, so I think it would be really interesting to hear a little bit about, her experience in swimming, because I don't think it was a particularly positive one, and I think there'll be plenty of women out there who might relate to that as well. So really, I'm just going to pass it over to Natasha to chat. So Natasha, just start off with, I know that you were a swimmer and that was your background to start with. So just tell us a little bit about your swimming background and some of the issues you had in that environment when you were growing up.
So when I was a teenager, I was a pretty intense swimmer. I never sort of fully went international. I made the shortlist for a couple of junior international teams. And I was on an England talent program, but never kind of broke through. It's bittersweet. So I have really fond memories, and my closest friend to this day is someone I met through swimming. But I think sort of as I get older, some of my memories from that time do become sort of more difficult to process the older I get. It was certainly, back then, it was an extremely intense sport. The focus at the time was very much on meters, and the more meters, the better, and the more time in the pool, the better. A lot of us were extremely overtrained. There was very little information available for women's health at the time. And for example, it was just accepted that teenage athletes of our kind of training intensity, it was normal to not have a period. And not only did your coach tell you that was normal, I remember going to the GP and my GP just shrugging it off and being like, oh well, you're an elite athlete, you probably won't have periods.
Which we now know is just so bad, don't we? The things have moved on so much now, and if you know anything about women's health, that we just know the one thing that you mustn't lose is your period, because it affects so many things. So that was really difficult, wasn't it? And there was a lot of issues about weight, wasn't there, as well, Natasha?
Yeah, so I remember quite clearly, on a Monday, the whole squad would get weighed in front of each other, and it would be monitored by our male coach, and the male swimmers would get weighed in front of the female swimmers and vice versa. And I know that a lot of the female swimmers felt really uncomfortable about this, and we would get really stressed about Mondays. I know that despite the fact that we were training sort of 18 hours a week, some of my teammates would deliberately diet on the Saturday and Sunday because they knew they were going to get weighed on the Monday. And, we didn't have a choice. If we didn't get weighed, we weren't allowed to get in the pool and start our training session. And so that, I think a lot of female swimmers had problems around food anyway, because you spend most of your time not really wearing any clothes. You already have quite a broad shoulders and a big body. So I think a lot of us felt kind of self-conscious anyway.
Yeah.
And for me, that really was a catalyst in sort of terms of a negative relationship with my body. I did have very disordered eating at the time. and that persisted after I retired from swimming as well. And it's, it took me probably a decade to get to having a comfortable relationship with food, but it still does affect me now because, for example, even when training for Ironmans, I know a lot of my teammates will sort of maybe consult a nutritionist and have a diet plan, and I can't do that because as soon as I start logging what I eat, I still get quite obsessive over it, and I lose that enjoyment of my relationship with food. So now, no matter what I'm training for, I eat what I want to eat and I eat what I enjoy eating. And obviously I try and be healthy, but I don't make a record of it because it just takes me back to a really dark place. And that's even, like 17 years old down the line.
Yeah, that's really tough. So, so when did you stop your swimming? At what age were you when you sort of kind of stopped competing competitively?
So I remember being age 16 and doing my GCSE year. That was probably my best year of swimming. I was training with the city of Birmingham at the time, and getting really fast, still making huge improvements, but also I was as obsessive academically as I was with swimming.
Natasha, just tell us what you do. Just introduce, because we haven't said what you actually do.
I'm a doctor training to be a GP. So I guess I did put that academia to good use. But yeah, so I was really balancing trying to achieve as highly in school as I was in swimming. So during that age 16 time, I would get up at about 3:45 in the morning, train. We had to drive about an hour to get to the pool, train for 2 hours, drive back, do a full day of school, and then go straight back to the pool, and then do an hour's land work, and then get home and trying to study and do coursework for my GCSEs. So I really burnt out that year. And unfortunately, one of my oldest swimming friend also passed away that summer. So I was burnt out and grieving for the loss of my best friend. And so going into sort of A-level year, sort of turning 17, that was when I was really struggling to kind of balance things at that point. And something had to give. And I'm still really grateful to my mum for providing me with perspective, because I thought that pursuing swimming would be kind of more special, but my mum was a swimmer and she gave up her academic life to pursue swimming, and she really regretted it because she never had the career that she wanted, and she wanted more for me. So she really pushed me to kind of follow my academics. So I changed swimming clubs when I was 17 to a more local one. And I managed to keep it going for another year, but I think the love had kind of been lost by that point. I was just far too burnt out, and I was struggling to even study at school. My grades were dropping at school. So yeah, sort of at age 17, I decided I really can't do this anymore. I'm really struggling to keep my head above water. I was having sort of probably my first mental health crisis. So yeah, I think from age 17 onwards I didn't do any regular swimming for about 6-7 years after that.
Okay. So, I mean, we now know that, a lot has changed within the swimming environment, hasn't it? Fortunately. I mean, hopefully you can clarify that as well, Kate, because you coach a lot of young girls now, don't you?
Yeah.
I'd like to think that things have moved on a bit from, Natasha's experience.
Things have moved on massively, and I mean, it's like everything though, there is always still work to do, because the culture of swimming is still quite volume based. The times that swimmers train are still unsociable hours, because that's the only pool time that pools give them. So they are still getting up at 4 in the morning. I got up at 4:35 this morning to go coaching, so that still exists, but there's no weighing. I do think that there's a lot of like really healthy looking girls in swimming in the Northwest. Like I always feel really proud of them when I see them. They look strong, they look amazing. And I think the culture of the kind of body shaming is less. I'm not going to say it's gone, because it's a big ship to turn. But yeah, I think things are better. But it's important that we all keep banging the drum of balance. And I'm interested, so Natasha, when you sort of stopped swimming, there must have been like a hiatus in terms of, well, what do I do? What do I do? Like, obviously you're doing your A levels, but what else did you do to kind of replace that big hole that swimming must have left? Or did you just literally like just need to rest?
Yeah, so there was a black hole. Swimming was my identity up until that point. Everyone at school knew me as the swimmer.
Yeah.
And I'd lost that huge part of myself, and I felt that. And I was having my first mental health crisis at the time. I managed to get my grades at A level, God knows how. I didn't really go to school that much in my A2 year because I wasn't well mentally. And then I took a couple of years out after my A levels. I didn't go straight into university because I needed a break. And I think I wasn't able to replace swimming with sport initially because I'd spent years just being so disciplined. And when everyone else was having their teenage years and sort of learning to rebel and kind of express themselves, I hadn't had that. And so kind of being age 18, 19, 20 was just like this huge period of rebellion for me. I discovered alcohol. I put on loads of weight. I didn't really know who I was anymore. So that was really difficult. And I think I tried to go swimming a couple of times. Like my parents still swam, so I tried tagging along with them, and I just couldn't do it anymore. Like I found it really difficult to actually just put one arm in front of the other. And so it wasn't until sort of I got to university a couple of years later that I wanted to take up sports again. But again, I couldn't go back to swimming. It was just too painful. So I kind of dabbled in water polo, and that didn't really work out. And it was sort of like halfway through medical school that I found the Tri Club.
I remember when you arrived. You were an exciting prospect, Natasha.
I hope I didn't let you down.
No, I didn't. I've still got the pictures of us at our counties, and you like you threw yourself into club life. Like you came in with a real buzz about you, and I obviously, and I've only found out I had no idea what a difficult road you'd taken to get to the Tri Club that day, because you were so full of enthusiasm, and you were clearly ready to do something when you did come. But it was a pretty brave step to suddenly join a triathlon club.
Yeah, it was so I'd had pretty much 6 or 7 years out of swimming at that point, and I'd gone like a very circuitous route. I'd tried other sports. I think I even went to like a rugby trial session at some point. But I came back to swimming, and I think it took those 7 years out for it to feel like a safe place for me to return to. And I remember looking at sort of always like a low-key masters club that I could join in the area. It always just came back to Manchester Triathlon Club, and I was like, well, I'm not a triathlete, but maybe they'll just let me come for their swimming sessions. So yeah, I threw myself into it because it was really nice to be part of a club again, and it was really nice for it to not just be uni students who were very sort of like monopolized in their vision. There's only like sort of a few things that uni students are interested in, whereas all of a sudden I was in a lane with like, I was probably the youngest in my early 20s, and then right up to sort of like Phil, who was like decades older than me. And I just loved that environment, and it just felt like a really nice, safe space for me.
You said that.
No, he won't. He'll be giggling.
But that is definitely the nice thing about I definitely think that's the nice thing about triathlon clubs, is it does seem to attract a real age range, from uni students up to people in their 70s and 80s, and the thing that we've got in common is the sport, isn't it? So we've always got a conversation starter because we can talk about our races or what we're training for. So tell us about your triathlon journey. Obviously you joined the club, Natasha. So when did you dip your toe into your first triathlon? Can you remember what it was?
Well, like most people in Manchester, it was obviously Wilmslow Triathlon. I think it took me a year from joining the club to get to that point. So it was trying to find a swimming club that got me to join the club. And then it was the members that got me hooked. And as you say, the age ranges. I think I'd bought my first bike like a year before. It wasn't even a road bike. and I was terrified. I didn't know how to ride it. And I think the club had like the training duathlons on at Boundary Park. And I remember being like really terrified of like even turning up to this training session of a duathlon, because it was just so foreign to anything I'd tried before. But I'd started like cycling to commute to the hospitals. And as you say, the members all the way up into sort of like their 70s. I remember Harry Davies gave me a lift to my first ever training duathlon. So he was a senior member of our club, a very experienced veteran triathlete. And he was lovely, because although he was experienced and, you know, very confident, and you know, he really knew that he belonged in that community, I didn't. And he got that, he got how I felt. And so even though it was just a training session, in his car, he drove me around the bike route before we got there, so I knew what to expect. And he just like really put me at ease. And again, I just thought, oh wow, this is a really nice environment. Like all of a sudden I found these people, like they're competitive with themselves but not with each other, and everyone's really nice to each other and really supportive. And that really sucked me in then. And then there wasn't really any looking back. I did Wilmslow Triathlon a year later, but I was still on my, you know, my terrible hybrid bike. I didn't even have a tri-suit. I did it in a swimming costume and a pair of shorts. And I loved it. It was great.
And so tell us a little bit about some of the triathlons you've done since then.
Yes,
and maybe your favourite one as well.
Yeah, so it started at Wilmslow Sprint Triathlon, so that's always going to have a special place in my heart. A year later, I progressed to some standard distance triathlons, which I enjoyed more, which surprised me, because as a swimmer, I was a sprinter. So I used to do what we called the 50-meter splash and dash. So I would be in the pool for sort of like anywhere between like 27 seconds to 57 seconds, like, and that was it. And then I was like, oh, I enjoyed this standard distance triathlon more than the sprint distance. And then I started hearing about this thing called Ironman. And I was like, wow, that's really, really cool. I can't imagine it like ever being able to do that. And there was a training weekend with the club where we went up into the Lake District, and there was just a handful of people, and there were some really like fast super people, like Lex was there, and I can't remember, but some people who'd done Ironmans, and we sat in the evening and they were telling me about their Ironman stories, and I was just, wow, this is amazing. Like, oh, I'd never, like, I just wish that one day I could do something like that. And it was nothing like that I thought I could do, having only just sort of been cycling for a couple of years. And then the more club sessions I attended, the more I realized other people had done these Ironmans, and they weren't like at the pointy end of the field. They were sort of what I would call regular human beings like myself. And I thought, well, if they've done it, maybe one day I could do that, and maybe it's not so impossible after all. And it took me a while to get there. I think sort of graduating medical school and working 70, 80 hours a week like sucked me in for a little while. But I remember after I'd been graduated for 2 years, I had a really terrible relationship breakdown and a broken heart, and I needed something to focus on. And I was like, right, well, I'm going to do an Ironman. It's now or never. And
yeah, most girls go and get their hair cut or get their nails done, and you think, I'll go and do an Ironman.
We've got like the soundbite is how to mend a broken heart. Just do an Ironman.
Yeah, just do an Ironman.
Well, it absolutely worked, because I was supposed to move to New Zealand to like with this guy and have this whole life set up in New Zealand, working in New Zealand, and I was like, well, gosh, my whole life's just fallen apart, and I really need something that's going to keep me on this, the straight and narrow, and give me a sense of purpose. And I kind of was researching easy Ironmans, and that's how I found Ironman Austria.
Obviously.
And I think I entered it, and then I think I messaged you, Kate, and was like, I think I need a coach.
We were like,
and you were like, oh, well, it's funny you should ask. I've just, started working with this lady called Mel.
She's amazing.
And And I hadn't even done a half Ironman at this point. I'd never even run a half marathon. I'd never run a marathon. And so Mel was really picking me up from scratch. I wasn't even very fit at that point either. And she had a year to kind of like whip me into shape.
That's plenty for Mel, though. You know that. It's plenty for Mel.
Yeah, exactly. And that was a really great year, because it could have been a really, really bad year. And I really felt like I had achieved that sense of direction, that sense of purpose, and there were a lot of setbacks. I think I got like a stress fracture and all sorts. But I did my first half Ironman and loved it. And then I did my first Ironman and loved it. And Ironman Austria to this day is probably like one of my favorite race experiences. And I do want to go back one day just to kind of relive that, because it is a fantastic race.
So, I mean, you did Austria, but then things started to fall apart a little bit, didn't they, Natasha, unfortunately, with injuries. So I think it would be really interesting if you talk to people about, some the problems you had with injuries and, your rehabilitation. And I think, Natasha is very inspirational, because it was really tough with the injuries that she had, and she never, ever gave up. And I will always be incredibly in awe of her for that, because it would have been so much easier to just throw in the towel. So, Natasha, tell everyone a little bit about the injuries you had and the difficulties you had to race again.
Yeah, so I think I'd entered Ironman France because I kind of called myself a flatlander before that, and I was like, I really want to learn how to cycle hills. And again, I think I gave you 12 months to get me ready for Ironman France. But at least we knew at this point that I could ride a bike a little bit, and I had a proper road bike by this point. Sort of got a few months into the training, and I started getting really, really, really bad anterior hip pain. And one weekend it just got so bad that I couldn't really walk anymore. And eventually got it diagnosed, and there was a labral tear there in my hip, and now I think pretty confident that was a red herring, and actually what the problem was the inflammation of the psoas, which is this huge muscle that goes from your spine down to the top of your leg. And initially they were very confident about being able to rehab me, and I've been working with this really brilliant physiotherapist, Ollie Williamson, who really knows his stuff, and we had this brilliant plan, and I stuck to that plan religiously, because one, I've spent a lot of money, like Ironmans aren't cheap, and I want to be able to do it, and two, I really enjoy training and I really enjoy racing, and if that was my best chance of being able to get back to training and racing, I will do whatever I'm told. And so I had this really prescriptive training plan from the physio, and it just things weren't healing as we'd hoped. So it was really quite prolonged. And basically, but I think between like January and June, July, I'd barely done any road cycling. And Nice is a really, really difficult bike course. And I just had no idea if I was going to be able to do that or not. I mean, I'd done my rehab religiously, but every time I got on a bike, I was just in pain. And then I think because my left hip was in pain, I was probably overcompensating with the right hip. So I also got a hamstring injury. So I had problems with the left psoas and the right hamstring. So an anterior problem and a posterior problem. And they both just, every time I got on a bike, they were just screaming out at me in pain. It was just really difficult. So I was doing a lot of swimming, I was doing a lot of strength work. My running was doing great because the strength work was really paying dividends in my running. So we knew the swim and the run would be okay. And if I could get off the bike and do the run, we knew I was going to finish, but we just didn't know if I was going to finish the bike ride. luckily, I think it was sort of 3 days before the race. So we were already in France, and I think that was the first day that my hamstring hadn't been hurting me. So that gave me like a bit of wind underneath my sails. And then on the day, thankfully, it was painful, but I got round. And so, all the strength and conditioning work that I'd been doing for sort of like the 7 months prior, like it did pay off. And there's absolutely no way I would have been able to get around that race if I hadn't done the strength and conditioning work and I hadn't done it religiously. And I've had similar problems. I did Ross this year, and that hamstring injury was flaring up again. And so basically road cycling went out the window, and I had to keep doing my strength and conditioning program. And all my bike rides were on the mountain bike rather than on a road bike, because I just couldn't bend over, because it's when you bend over that it puts that stress on the top of the hamstring. And again, I had no idea how Roth was going to go. And Roth was difficult, but that was more sort of due to kind of stomach issues. And actually the hamstring, again, held out for the race. But again, I wouldn't have been able to get around that race either if I hadn't stuck to my rehab. And it's really difficult. Like I say that like it's really easy to just stick to your rehab, and it's not, because you're a triathlete because you enjoy swimming, cycling and running, and you enjoy being outside. Well, that's where I am anyway. And I enjoy the camaraderie of my teammates. I'm not a triathlete because I enjoy being inside in a gym. I really hate doing those sessions. I find them so boring, and I really have to force myself to do them. And I still have to force myself to do them now. But the only motivation that gets me through is, what is my end goal? It's my end goal because that I want to race is my end goal, that I want to actually carry on doing triathlon, and I want to carry on doing it for the rest of my life. And that's kind of how I force myself to go and do those sessions, because otherwise I think I just have to pack it all in, and that is not what I want.
Yeah, I think I think that will resonate with quite a lot of people, Natasha, because I don't know many triathletes that actually like doing their strength and conditioning. It's definitely an afterthought, although we do know, and there's research shows again and again that, if you want to prevent injuries, then you do need to do your strength work, but also it makes you a much more powerful triathlete. I mean, you talked about the fact that it made you a much better runner. So that was one of the definitely pluses of doing the strength work. And Natasha, you're a run walker, aren't you?
I was going to say, this was what I was going to ask, because you in particular, as somebody who has really like endorsed the run walk strategy, and it has worked really well for you. And I think sometimes I suggest to people, have you thought about doing this? And people are shocked. They're like, no, I'm going to run it all. But I mean, the times that you've achieved doing run walk have been phenomenal, haven't they? Do you want to talk to us? I mean, obviously that was a decision between you and Mel, I would imagine, to do that. Can you talk us through how that came about?
It came about after my stress fracture, because when you are finally allowed to start jogging again, you do have to build it up so gradually. And so after my stress fracture, that was like 4 years ago, gradually you run for like a minute, and then the rest of it you have to walk, and then you gradually increase the running and reduce the walking. And I found that I actually really enjoyed it that way. I'm someone who my whole life since I was a kid has really struggled with muscle aches and pains, both during exercise and afterwards. And my calves and my quads in particular, when running, like they would just fatigue so quickly. And this is no matter how much strength and conditioning I do. And I found that by running and then just doing like a 2-minute walk, it almost like resets my calves and my quads a little bit. And for me, my current pattern is 13 minutes run, 2 minutes walk, so in blocks of 15 minutes. And I am so much faster doing that than if I ran continuously. And that has always just worked for me. And mentally, I find it a lot easier, especially on those long runs, because it just breaks it down into 15-minute chunks. And then it works, like when you get into racing, it works really well with aid stations as well, because you can if you're clever with it, you can tie in your walks with aid stations. And And so I absolutely love it. And I think even if I don't know if I'll ever get to the point where I'm completely injury free, but if I do get to that point, I think I'll carry on, just because it really suits me. And I've got 10K PB, half marathon PB, and marathon PBs all doing run walk. So yeah, it really, really works for me, because I can just run so much faster in that chunk, and then get a little rest and reset. And then I think the important thing to remember is the walk is not a total rest. You don't slow down to a grinding halt on the walk. The idea is that you still keep your heart rate up, and you're still panting a little bit on the walk, because it's an active recovery. Because I think if you ran and then you walked slowly and then you try to start running again, that would actually be really difficult, and that would slow you down. But the idea is to like really speed power walk on that recovery section. And then that means that you can just get that going into your run quite quickly and sort of more seamlessly.
Yeah, because the 2-minute walk gives you just a slightly different motion, doesn't it? It's the way, you know, obviously the difference between running and walking are different, so that you're kind of engaging different muscles, but you're using them in a different way. So as you say, it's kind of almost like it's a 2-minute recovery every sort of 30 minutes for you. But as you say, it's not about then just walking really slowly. It's about still power walking and keeping your heart rate up. And I mean, it's worked really successfully with you. It's worked really successfully with a couple of other my athletes as well, who, again, you know, just find it difficult to run continuously. And I think it has definitely got a lot more popularity now, hasn't it? This run walk and
yeah, it has, but I still think there's still a bit of a stigma. Certain sort of parts of the triathlon community. And I think, you know, interesting, like your times are pretty good, Natasha, and the people that I coach that use it are actually my faster runners, you know, because they know the value in actually that, like you said, it's the physical recovery, but also that kind of mental recovery as well, where it just gives you that space you can go again, and you know, you can train a bit longer, you can train more consistently. So I think it's really interesting that, you know, it started from a stress fracture, but actually if and when you are injury free, you'll probably keep doing it. It's brilliant.
Yeah, and I recommend to all my athletes who are doing Ironman to walk through feed stations anyway. I think it's much more beneficial that you the walk, or even if it's just from one end of the feed station to the other, will give you that little bit of recovery. But you know, in an Ironman, it's so important to get your fuel on board and get you hydrated. That you know, unless you're really at the spiky end of it, there's no point. You're better off just getting the water down and
you take having control of your fueling.
And then as you say, it helps to break it down, doesn't it, into chunks. So you think, right, well, I can run to the next feed station, and then that's when I'm going to walk through there. I'm going to make sure that I've had a gel or whatever it is that you want, and some water, and then you start again. And I think that helps mentally, but also it has massive other benefits as well. Stops you being dehydrated, and but yeah, no, I mean, it's worked really well for you, hasn't it, Natasha?
It has, and I think it does take a little bit of mental resilience, I think, in races. So there seems to be two types of people that respond to me in races. There are the people that check that I'm okay, and like, you know, they'll run past me, or they'll be spectating, they'll be like, are you all right, do you need anything? And that's quite nice, actually, that people are checking in with you. And I was like, no, it's fine, I run walk. And then I'll run past them again.
You must annoy quite a few people as well, Natasha.
I actually really enjoy it during the cross-country seasons, because I've made friends with people, because we're constantly like toing and froing with people during the races. So I do like that. But there is this other group of people, and these are where attitudes really need to change, because they think that you've given up, or they think that you're not trying hard enough. I got really angry in wrath actually, and I ended up shouting at a spectator because he like was really condescending to me and was just like, you know, if you actually ran, the race would be over faster. And I was just like, you don't know what you're talking about. And just like, I kind of shouted at him. Because it's no one's business. Like, you stick to your own race plan, and you know, walking does not mean that you've given up. No. You know, that, especially for me, it's part of my race plan. I'm sticking to my race plan, and it's no one else's business but mine. And I think if you are gonna, you know, shout at people, like do it positively and encouragingly. And maybe he thought he was motivating me, but I've received like a few different comments like that over the years, and so you do kind of have to be ready to expect that. But as long as you're okay and you're confident in your plan and you know what you're doing, then yeah, it is very effective.
Well, those sort of attitudes, they do still run through communities, and like, without swearing, but it's like the whole "don't be S word" kind of mentality, and it's like, well, what does that even mean? You know, it's rubbish. You sort of feel like you want to have a sign on your back going, "My walking's probably faster than your running." So, you know, that whole like, you do you and I'll do me, and we'll see you at the end and we'll have a beer kind of thing. It's just but yeah, those are some of the attitudes that I think put people off from doing run walk. Even people, you know, when they do a half Ironman before the Ironman, and you say, I don't want you to go all out on this. This is not your A race. I want you to try and pace it. And they're like, yeah, but people think I'm not trying. And it's like, but you're doing it for a specific you know, is that how just
is it their race or is it your race?
Yeah, exactly. And I think we all get a bit sucked into peer pressure and those loud voices, and you're, you know, you're not frightened of retaliating, are you? But you know, you could have easily been like, oh, I probably should run a bit more, and then you've messed up your strategy and you've messed up your race.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think most of the time in triathlon, I do find it an extremely inclusive sport, and that's what sucked me in and that's what's kept me going. But I think sometimes there are these kind of perceived images that are holding us back as a sport. And I think possibly because you know, I do have a bit of imposter syndrome, and I do sort of have hang-ups from my time as a swimmer. But I know when I first sort of made the transition to longer distance triathlon, and even, you know, more recently as well, sometimes I have to check my thinking, but I almost feel embarrassed telling people that I am a long distance triathlete, because I know that my body shape is quite, well, to me, I'm large for an endurance athlete. And I know that, like, in my normal day-to-day life, I don't think I'm large, but I think just sort of when I look at sort of what we historically have classed as an endurance athlete physique, I know I'm like 2 or 3 times the size of that. And I kind of know that sometimes when I've told people that I do Ironmans, they kind of look at me sometimes, and I feel that they're kind of judging me. And I know I've had like conversations with Mel about this several times, and Mel always has to put me in my place and reminds me, you are at the body shape and you're at the weight that works for you. And actually, if you lost weight, you're going to get injured, you're going to be too tired, you're not going to be able to complete your training sessions, and actually you're going to be a worse athlete for it. And I'm much better at it now. And I actually really like how strong my body is. But it's taken me a while to actually feel that, you know, I deserve to take up space in endurance triathlon, because of just, I feel that I look so different to everyone else.
And actually, there's a lot of criticism of Christian Blumenfeld, wasn't there? You know,
oh my God, I know. It drives me mental. Like, he's proven himself over Olympic distance, half Ironman, like full Ironman. He's a champion at all 3, and yet people are still saying, oh, but how much faster could he be if he lost weight? And it's like, he doesn't need to go any faster. He's already the best.
He's already the fastest.
Yeah, and it just goes to show that, you know, there is no one body type that is right for a sport, you know.
Then on the other hand, you get elite athletes getting criticised for looking too slim. You know, there was one recently that I saw on Instagram, really well-known endurance athlete, who was like, people saying, oh, you're looking a bit slim, like, you okay? And it's like, well, this is just me, you know. And I think it's hard, isn't it?
Yeah, you know, as you say, there are all sorts of body types, and there isn't a one size fits all. I think, you know, maybe 10, 15 years ago, there was kind of that thought that, you know, to be an athlete of certain discipline, you needed to look a certain way. And I really feel like in the last couple of years, we've slowly kind of twigging that, you know, we don't have to be that, and different body sizes work for different people. But I know it sometimes takes a while for that to kind of like trickle down. And I think that is kind of hard for some people to deal with, and sometimes feel that they are deserving to take up space in these different sports. And I really hope that we continue to kind of like move in that direction.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it will, and I think the more we learn about the benefits of strength and conditioning and things like that, because even when I started coaching, it wasn't a big thing to do strength and conditioning, and a lot of the kind of theory out there was like, well, you do paddles on the swim for your strength, you did hill reps for run strength, you did low cadence work for bike strength, you don't need to go to the gym. And I think we're learning that actually adding real sort of deliberate, precise strength and conditioning is really helpful. But of course that creates sometimes in itself a slightly different body shape, which I think is a really good thing, and people are starting to appreciate that actually better stability and better strength comes with a different body shape. And if that means less injuries and less athletes who are competing on low energy availability and less red S and all of that, then that's got to be a good thing. But it will take time, won't it, for that to come through? Because I mean, I've only been coaching 10 years, so it's less than 10 years old that we've actually gone, you need to get strong, and with strength will come, and that's the other thing, is people think, oh, get strong, I get bigger. You don't get bigger, your proportions are maybe slightly different, or for me, I think it looks better. But it's still quite a new thing within the last decade, isn't it?
Yeah, my body shape has definitely changed so much since I started doing strength and conditioning, and I think it can be difficult to get your head around. I think because any change is weird. I know if I get my hair cut, like I come home and I think I look weird just because it's different, and it takes me a few days to get used to it. So when your body changes when you start lifting weights, like it does feel weird. And I think I've just done a massive wardrobe clear out, actually, because there are loads of clothes that no longer fit me because my body shape has changed. And I think initially that did scare me. But then I was just saying, gosh, no, like I'm so powerful, like I am really strong, and I don't want to fit into that skirt anymore, because that was a weak girl that fit into that skirt. Like I'm strong now.
That was probably an
my body serves me so much better
as well.
Yeah. Yeah, my body just serves me so much better now, and it looks different, and it is bigger in places, but it looks better, and I'm actually like really pleased with it. But I think that again is a difficult mindset, and perhaps maybe in particular for female athletes, like, because historically for male athletes, like being bigger and stronger might be seen as a more positive thing, but for women, I think sometimes it is a real adjustment to kind of make that transition and be able to accept that your body shape is going to change. But once you kind of like put it in the bigger perspective and actually realize the bigger impact of that, I think it can be seen in a really positive light.
Yeah, and once you realize how much stronger you are, you don't want to lose that anyway. As she said earlier, your running is so much better, and there's just so much evidence to show now that you'll be a better cyclist, you'll be a better runner, you'll be a better swimmer, and you're less likely to get injuries. I mean, what isn't there not to like about that?
So I think, I can't remember exactly how much my PB on my 10K was, but that was the most telling. So like, I think pre-weightlifting and post-weightlifting, my 10K time went down by like 4 or 5 minutes.
Wow. There's a percentage that's loads, isn't it?
Yeah. And even like for example, cycling up hills, which has one of been my huge like personal challenges.
You didn't like hills much, did you?
No, I didn't. But like lifting heavy weights has made me so much stronger and able to cycle up hills. And I noticed the difference actually when I stopped. So I was a bit naughty after Roth, and I stopped my strength work for like 2 to 3 months after Roth, just to give myself a bit of a break mentally as much as anything. And we started like trying to cycle up some of like the big hills up in Lancashire, and I was just like, I feel really weak. And then I look at my times on Strava, and like it's taken me like several minutes slower just to get up one hill, just because my legs are weak. So it pays dividends like in so many different ways.
So how many strength sessions? So if you were training sort of, normally, i.e. training for something, what percentage of your week now is strength conditioning, or how many sessions a week would you do strength and conditioning?
25%. So I mean, as you know, as coaches, it's very individual for the athlete, but we found the balance that worked best for me was 2 of each. So 2 swim, 2 bike, 2 run, 2 strength. And if any of those sessions had to go, we would always like prioritize the most important sessions, and that would nearly always be strength sessions, and then like a long bike or run. So if anything had to go, you know, it's always the swim that had to go first, because that's the one I can get away with missing sometimes. But yeah, strength always had to be prioritized.
And I think that's one thing that we're moving towards now, but a lot of athletes probably don't prioritize strength conditioning, do they? Because it's like extra, you know, it's like, oh, I should probably do that, but I need to swim, bike and run.
Yeah.
But actually the winter is the perfect time to do it, you know, to really start to introduce it to your, you know, your training, because we can all afford to sort of drop a swim and a bike and a run each week, and replace them with strength work at this time of year. And then, you know, worry about introducing the more swimming and biking later when you need to get the miles done, or and then, you know, if you concentrate on your strength work now over the winter, and then so maybe do 3 sessions a week, and then cut that down to 2 or 1 later on when you're upping the number of bikes and runs that you need to do and swims, and then just do maintenance work. But you know, I think people, you know, definitely other coaches and British Triathlon are all starting to understand the benefits of strength work, and it's kind of again trickling down to the normal athlete, that actually they do need to do this too if they want good results, but also, as you say, just to feel stronger.
Yeah. So at the moment I'm not training for anything. I don't really have any races in the calendar, so my training is just basically what I feel like doing, apart from the strength conditioning, which I'm still like religiously trying to fit in every week now, because I just know that if I want to get back into triathlon in the future, I need this, and you know, I do want to get back into triathlon. So yeah, even though like my swimming, cycling and running is very variable at the moment, the strength training is the consistent.
So Natasha, you said you haven't got any races in the diary. Have you got a bucket list?
Yeah, sort of. I think I kind of like, I didn't have like bucket list like destinations or races. I kind of just was, the big one for me was that I want to do an Ironman. And then I think once I did an Ironman, I was like, okay, well, I want to do Roth, and I've done Roth. And I think it's not necessarily about the big races for me anymore now. It's just about the enjoyment. I think I would like maybe one day to go and do Escape Alcatraz, just because I really like the sort of like the history around that race, and Alpe d'Huez as well, just because having always been scared of hills, that seems to be like a ridiculously hilly race and in an incredibly beautiful setting. But no, otherwise, it would just be, you know, if my friends say they're entering a race, and if, you know, I can tag along with them, that would be nice. Yeah, it's all about the enjoyment for me now.
No, I like that. I like that. It's kind of like you've ticked off the 2 big things, and then it's like, okay, I can just enjoy it now. And
yeah.
and it's
I would
not
like
like
to
you
go
weren't
back and do
before.
Austria.
Yeah. Oh yeah, you need to go and do that. You need to go and do that.
Yeah.
Interesting. And the
be a nice
social element of triathlon is so important, isn't it? And that's kind of where you get to. It's that kind of connection, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's really nice when I did Austria, I went with a friend, and when we did Roth, there was a really nice like group from the club that was out there, and that just felt really special. And I think in swimming you always went away as a team to galas together, and I kind of miss that sometimes, and I really love cheering people on, and
Swimmers are good at that. I do think swimmers are good at like that.
Yeah.
Even though it's an individual sport, like cheering your team on is like the best thing, and I guess if you can recreate that in triathlon, like that is the dream, isn't it?
Yeah, I love that. So like if I can go to a race where I know there's going to be other teammates there, that'll just make it so much more attractive and enjoyable for me. And yeah, just having that sort of like that camaraderie again, which is what got me into the sport in the first place.
First place.
Yeah.
Go on.
What would be the one thing that you would say that triathlon has given you, the most important thing?
My health, like mentally. There like mental health is for me like it's a chronic illness. It's not something that is ever going to be cured for me, and it's about managing my symptoms on a daily basis. And sport is a huge part of that. It's been more powerful and more instrumental in my recovery than, you know, any drug and any therapy that I've had. And being in a sport that gives me structure, that gives me enjoyment, and especially in a club that has been so welcoming to me, like it's just, yeah, it's given me my health in a really, really, really big way.
And it's made you, you know, it's given you big challenges, hasn't it? And you've overcome all of those. So again, that is the massive positive for you, I think, is that, you know, Ironman is incredibly difficult. And, you know, I've had many conversations with you where you thought, well, you know, I can't do this. And you always prove yourself wrong, don't you?
Always do.
Yeah, I think before every long distance triathlon I've done, so I've done 3 140.6s now, and I think before every single one, like me and Mel have had the same conversation. I don't know if I'm going to be able to finish this race. And Mel's had to kind of like slap me on the wrist and say, don't be silly, of course you will. But I mean, especially I think with Nice, we really didn't know.
No.
And I do remember thinking after that race, I don't care what life throws at me. If I can finish that course after having those injuries and not even being able to ride a bike, I can literally deal with whatever life throws at me now. And so, yeah, it's giving me that
confidence. Going to be my next question is obviously the life of a medic is also pretty tough and is probably like an endurance event in itself. But does your kind of resilience that you've got from triathlon and Ironman, does that sort of help you on a day-to-day basis, do you think?
Not necessarily on a day-to-day, but definitely when things get hard. So in sort of 2 different ways. So for example, if work is really stressful or I've been dealing with something particularly traumatic at work, going for a run, for example, is the best way to clear my head. And just knowing that I've got like a structure with my training as well to kind of keep me on the straight and narrow, because I think otherwise when you get really stressed, things can spiral and you can get sucked into this really black place. Whereas triathlon, like well, with my training programs as well, they've been really nicely structured, and that's, you know, just given me something to keep me on an even keel. And then, yeah, secondly, like just knowing what I've been able to overcome physically, like especially with getting to the start line, even the start line, let alone the finish line at Ironman Nice. Yeah, I do feel that I could sort of conquer anything. And things are a lot easier now. I'm training to be a GP, and I work full time in well, I work part-time, but always in GP placements now, whereas until August I was working in hospitals doing night shifts and sort of 13-hour shifts, and so there were times when that was really difficult to deal with. And yeah, having the confidence of just knowing that I can cope in adversity does give you a little bit of an edge, I think.
It's got to. I bet you were quite glad to say goodbye to the night shifts then.
Oh, you have no idea.
Yeah. You could do a whole other podcast on the power of sleep. So going from being a swimmer to doing night shifts, I mean, you've probably got, you know, you've worn the t-shirt many times. So yeah. So what if you had to give anyone kind of coming into the sport a little bit of advice, what would your words of wisdom be?
Don't be intimidated, I think, because I think it's quite easy to kind of focus on maybe like the more experienced athletes and the quicker athletes and feeling that you don't belong. And actually, once you look past that and you realize there's actually just loads of other normal people, and everyone's just there to participate and take part, and then you realize that, yeah, actually, you know, this is for me. But sometimes it can be really difficult when there's loads of like really talented, fast people around. And I know that I suffered with that a little bit when I first joined the club, because we have a real range of abilities, and I just sort of looked at all these like really fast people and thought, oh God, I'm in the wrong place. But I'm glad I stuck at it, because I quickly realised that no, that was my place, and it's a place for everyone.
And it's interesting, isn't it? Because you felt like that, but equally there would have been people looking at you thinking, wow, she can swim, she can bike, she can run. So there's always somebody for all of us to kind of go, oh, look at them, they're amazing. And it's, I suppose for you, I'd say to you, like, you would be surprised at how many people you've inspired. And as much as you have always felt like you're the imposter, there'll be loads of people that will be trying to emulate what you've managed to achieve. And I think all of us need to remember that there's always somebody who kind of thinks that what you've done is great. So I think, don't put yourself down, don't be that imposter, because I think you've definitely earned your place in the triathlon community.
Yeah. And Natasha, when I said you were going to be our first guest to a few people that we both know, they said, oh yeah, Natasha will be a great guest, she's got so much to say, and lots for people to learn from. So you definitely, other people do look at you with great respect, but I mean, it's I see it time and time again, people thinking that they're imposters and they shouldn't be there, and it's just not true, because there's a place for everyone, and at the end of the day, we're racing ourselves, not anyone else. You're doing it for yourself.
We said this last week, didn't we? Like, every triathlete thinks they're rubbish at something, or at least something. And I think that's the beauty of the sport, because there's always a bit of humility there. Like, everybody is kept kind of on their toes and kept humble, aren't they?
Yeah. And you just reminded me of another thing I love about triathlon that I really need to throw in there, is that like it's one of the few sports where people cheer you on when they're overtaking you. So obviously, being a stronger swimmer, I get overtaken a lot on the bike, because I come out sort of towards the front, and then like the whole field comes past me. But they're always so encouraging. Like, they're coming past me and they're like, oh, come on, girl, like, go, Natasha. And I just think that's really, really nice. And it's just a lovely thing about the sport.
Yeah, no, it is a really nice thing about the sport, isn't it? That people are so encouraging, and they stay around afterwards and cheer you, and then you see that at Ironman events anyway, don't you? Because the last person across the line is sometimes gets is the hero of the day, basically. And it's great that the pros stay. That usually the people who come first do stay around to see the last person cross the line. So that makes it a great sport. One more thing I wanted to touch on, Natasha, just because you are the queen of the saddle.
Yeah, we haven't even mentioned the saddle. Oh my goodness.
So Natasha's had quite a few problems with saddles, you tell us, Natasha, because I mean you've done a lot of research on saddles, and you've struggled with saddle sores and stuff. And I'm sure you're not the only person out there, so I think it would be quite interesting to just hear what you've done and what you found, and etc.
Yeah, sure. So I think, well, I came to cycling quite late, so I certainly hadn't developed any skin resilience in that area. And when I started cycling, my limiting factor on the bike for the length of my bike rides was not my fitness, it wasn't my legs, it was how much pain I was in the saddle area. And that was twofold. So that was kind of friction pain and also pressure pain. And it was really, like, I nearly gave up cycling at one point because it just got that bad. I'd been to my GP a few times. I was even referred to gynecology at one point, just to make sure there wasn't anything else weird going on. And it turns out it was all just the saddle. And cycling historically a men's sport, everything is kind of developed around men's anatomy, and women's stuff is usually an afterthought. Again, that is changing now, but historically this is where we've come from. And so I think the most important sort of thing to take away from this is all women's bodies are shaped completely differently, and men's bodies too, but there's no one size fits all. So if your saddle isn't working for you, have a think about why. one thing that might change your life as a female cyclist struggling with saddle pain is getting a wider saddle. I'm still surprised by how difficult it is to find a wider saddle, even though women's cycling is really increasing in popularity. So most women have a wider pelvis. And so if you're sitting on a men's saddle, so this is the man's saddle, and this is sort of your pelvic bones, so pelvic bones here, it's going to be over the top of the saddle, and those pelvic bones are not going to be supported, and they're going to be swaying over the top, which is putting all the pressure on your perineum, so that soft tissue area underneath, and that is really, really painful. So a wider saddle, most women need a saddle that is 155 millimeters. And that will sit much better. It will support your bones a lot better, so you're not rocking from side to side, and it's your sit bones that are taking the pressure and not that soft fleshy bit underneath. So that was the thing that had made the biggest difference to me, was getting a saddle that is 155 millimeters wide. Still really difficult to find, but they are out there. And then the second bit is saddles with cutouts. Again, this has made a huge difference to me. And again, that's because I do feel a lot of pressure on that soft fleshy area. And so a saddle with a cutout alleviates some of that pressure. And that makes a huge difference for me in terms of reducing chafing and reducing pressure. So they're two really important things. And another important thing that I've found is, sorry to like go down the core strength and conditioning a bit, but actually core strength. So actually to hold a good position on the bike, you need good core strength, because you need to hold you basically need to tuck your pelvis underneath. And to do that, you're using your abs. And otherwise we have a tendency to sort of arch our backs and kind of rock our pelvis backwards, and that's going to increase sort of chafing on the side there. So a wider saddle, a cutout, and good core strength is really going to help your position on the bike and reduce pain and chafing.
That's all really interesting. So yeah, if you're a woman who's struggling with seats, I mean, I know men do as well, but I know that you had a terrible time, didn't you? It took a long time and quite a few years before you got to a place where you've got a saddle that was comfortable enough.
Are there any manufacturers that you feel are making more progress in this area, or did you manage to like reach out? I hate that term, sorry, but did you manage to reach out to any like manufacturers to talk to them about saddles?
So I am a big fan of Selle Italia. So Selle Italia will do wide saddles, and they also do saddles with cutouts. And what I really like about them is it's not just, they don't just do one wide saddle and don't just do one saddle with a cutout. There's a variety. So if one of them doesn't fit, you can try one of their other ones as well. It's probably also worthwhile mentioning there is a guy called Phil Burt who did my bike, well, he's done both of my bike fits, but he's a physiotherapist that's got a lot of interest in this area. So again, he tinkered with my bike fit to alleviate pressure on this area, but he's also teamed up with Endura to create a new bib short with a special chamois.
Okay. That's news to me.
A new bib short with a special chamois that again is supposed to sort of like alleviate pressure for women in that area. I haven't tried that myself, but I think I've heard anecdotally someone has tried it and rated it really well. But yeah, it might be worth looking into that. I'm not sure if he's published his work yet, but it will be there somewhere.
Well, Phil was always famous, wasn't he, for the work he did with British Cycling on exactly saddle sores and that kind of stuff. So so he's definitely got expertise in that area. So it's great that you mentioned him.
What I liked about Phil actually was because I think as a woman it can be quite embarrassing to talk about this. And Phil, despite being male, like, he was no nonsense, didn't make me feel uncomfortable at all, didn't make me feel embarrassed. He knew exactly what I was on about, and really made me feel comfortable and at ease discussing those issues with him. So he is someone that I would recommend. He knows his stuff, and he will treat you well.
Yeah, he will. He used to go to primary school with my children, so we used to talk about this stuff in the playground. So yeah, it's great. But
you're right, a lot of women are really embarrassed to talk about it, aren't they? You know,
I know, and he's quite a big burly man, isn't he? Like, you know, he's about as masculine as they come, really. So actually the fact that he's just totally cool with it all, it's really refreshing, isn't it?
Yeah, and Mel, as you said, like I think women are embarrassed to talk about this, and I think when I first started researching in this area, sort of maybe like 8-9 years ago, I found it really difficult to find like stuff about it, and that's why I kind of thought, oh gosh, it's something wrong with me. And I think, you know, that's gradually changing, because I'm gobby, I don't really have a filter, I will talk to anyone about anything. And every time I've kind of spoken to a woman about it, they've been like, oh yeah, you know what, like actually, like sometimes I struggle with that too, or my friend does. And so yeah, it's definitely a widespread issue, and it's not one that we should be embarrassed about. You know, it's just anatomy.
Yeah. And I think that's really, so, you know, as a medic, you even thought there was some, you know, you like still doubted yourself, and you've got more learning than a lot of us. So, you know, the fact that you're saying it's just anatomy, it's, you know, it's like if your elbow is hurting on your TT bar.
Exactly,
you know,
exactly.
Yeah.
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 We're
very, very British, aren't we?
Yeah, very British. Yeah.
Well, thanks, Natasha. It's been really, really lovely having you on and chatting. And so, you know, you're definitely not an imposter in the triathlon world. And you know, I've always been impressed with you and your resilience more than as much as anything, and just never stopping, and just, you know, even when you just had no idea whether you would finish a race, at least you always were always on the start line.
Yeah.
You know, and you always finished. So
thank you.
And you have been a great advocate for the sport as well. You know, I think people listening to this will definitely agree you're a great advocate for the sport.
Oh, thank you very much. It's really kind of you to say.
Well, we've enjoyed interviewing you. It's been lovely. No, thank you for giving up your time, and yeah, I've really enjoyed hearing your story. So thank you, and thank you for being so honest about it all.
And what's your plans this weekend, Natasha? Are you doing anything?
Yeah, so club trail run tomorrow morning, which is being hosted by lovely Fiona. And then Fiona's invited me to go rock climbing in the afternoon in the Peak District, so I'll be doing that as well.
Nice.
Okay, well, I shall see you at the trail run tomorrow.
Oh, fantastic.
The Mel's trail running. So what else have you got planned, Mel? What's your big
well, the weather is going to be glorious, apparently. It doesn't look like it at the moment, but we're meant to have a really good weekend, aren't we? So having hoped to go out with the club on my bike last weekend, which didn't happen because the weather was awful, I'm hoping to get out and do a big ride on the Sunday as well. So.
Well, I hope you enjoy the weather, because I've got 12 hours on the pool side at Wigan on Saturday, and I've got the best event of the whole of the swimming calendar, Inter-Counties at Ponds Forge on Sunday, but there will be no fresh air. Like if it's sunny, I will not have a clue. So when you're out there pedaling in the peaks or climbing in the peaks, just think of me sweating at Ponds Forge.
Yeah,
I've done my time. I've done my time doing that.
This is why I like to bring it full circle for you. Right. Well, thank you everyone for listening. I hope you've enjoyed listening to Natasha's story, and we will be bringing somebody else with their own journey to discuss with you next time. So we will see you all soon, and thank you so much, Natasha. That has been amazing.
Thank you.